Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
There's a lot to talk about. It feels like geopolitics and politics domestically and abroad are all over the place.
Good morning, Francine. Nice to see you as well. Yeah, I think they are all over the place. I'm here in London as vice chairman of Teneo, a CEO advisory firm. And we're basically advising our clients who see a lot of unpredictability on the horizon, and they're trying to scenario plan for which way various governments are going to go. It's a little easier to predict here, I think, than it is in my country, which is a razor-thin polling and election. And it's just hard to determine who's going to win the election. Therefore, you have to scenario plan on two different potential administrations.
So can you talk us about those scenarios? I mean, is it impossible to know who will win come November now?
Yeah, I think it's just too close to call. If you really want to look at it, if this thing is tied in polling going into the election, which is probably the likeliest of scenarios, because right now Trump is polling at peak, Biden is polling below his peak performance. Let's just assume Democrats come home at the end of the day, as they typically do. It's probably going to be a few 100,000 voters in about 5 or 6 states that will determine the outcome of this election. My state of Wisconsin is one of those. Trump won it by 25,000 votes out of 1.61 million cast in 2016, and then he lost it to Biden by 20,000 votes. It's just that close.
And this is what campaigning. What makes a difference? Is it the candidates showing up, or is it big policies on the
turnout,
economy?
Campaigning, candidates showing up, the ground game as we describe it, and getting your turnout organization going. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to the new swing voter in America, which is a suburban, college-educated swing voter. And let's go back to Wisconsin, for example. Out of 1.61 million cast, 53,000 Wisconsinites, that's what we call ourselves, in the suburban part of Wisconsin, didn't vote for Trump, but voted for every other Republican on the ballot. And then 20,000 of those 53,000 voted for Biden, giving him the 20,000 margin of victory that he got. It's just that close. There's probably going to be Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania.
So too close to call. What happens if Donald Trump is in the White House?
Right.
The economy.
On tax policy, personally, I think it will be much better, and a lot of executives see it that way, because you have to remember that our tax law that we wrote in 2017. The individual side of that tax code has many expiring provisions, some of which hit small and medium-sized businesses. And then we have some corporate provisions like research and development tax credit, expensing provisions. Those are all up for grabs. The next presidency will help determine what happens there. So, Trump's going to be more pro-business on taxes. Biden is proposing to get rid of those things. And then it comes to tariffs. Trump's proposing a lot of tariff increases. Biden hasn't reduced the Trump tariffs. He's continued those tariffs, but I don't think he's proposing a whole new range of tariffs with respect to everything but China. On China, you basically have a bipartisan consensus.
So you've called Donald Trump unfit for office. Are you surprised at the amount of money of Wall Street titans behind Trump?
No, because I think it's too close to call, and I think people are basically trying to hedge their bets and decide. They don't know who's going to win the White House. So I think they want to basically make sure that they understand which direction the country is going to go and which administration, which they do not know will take place. That's what we basically help our clients at Teneo do, which is, what's trade going to look like under this administration? What are regulations going to look like? What's mergers and acquisitions and antitrust going to look like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And right now, it's just too tight to see, so you have to plan for both contingencies.
Okay, how often do you get asked about budgets and the debt ceiling?
Yeah, that's my hobby horse. That's my biggest. That's what I used to do in Congress. Fiscal policy is my thing. I'm very concerned about this. One of the reasons why I'm frustrated, like many Americans, about our choices for president is neither is proposing to do anything about a coming debt crisis in our country. Our debt is already as large as our economy. It's going to go nowhere but twice as big as that. And so we have an entitlement problem, which is these entitlement programs are going bankrupt by the end of the decade. And so no one's proposing to solve that. We have to get ahead of that. Otherwise, we're going to have a debt crisis in America. And it's not inconceivable to have a Treasury auction failure in a short period of time.
So what's a short period of time? Like in the next 6 months, 12 months?
No,
is it a big credit
it would probably be after we're done cutting interest rates. So if you're going into an interest rate cutting environment, you're going to be able to sell your bonds. Jay Powell just said he's going to do only one rate cut this year. Let's just assume it's in December. And then a number of rate cuts, if all things work according to plan, in 2025. So the question is, let's just assume, say, 2026, it's really hard to put a finger on these things. Do we have clarity in our fiscal policy? Have we done what we need to do to get our balance sheet in a good place? And right now, both of our candidates for president aren't proposing to do a single thing about it. I think the only shot we have, given that political reality, is perhaps an entitlement commission, but one with teeth that requires Congress to vote on it. I served on Bull Simpson the last time we had one of these things, and it could be ignored by the president and Congress, and it was. So you have to have an entitlement commission that says Congress is going to have to vote on this, up or down, no filibuster, no amendments. Yeah. And then hopefully you have a president that's willing to accept its results, if provided they're substantial. And that's, in my opinion, the best way we get out of, short of Congress actually doing its job and fixing this problem, that's the way we get out of the ditch. What
are the chances of Congress actually taking a more, I guess, fiscally responsibly approach and trying to fix it?
Well, you have to remember we have to have economic growth. And if you have a massive tax increase on businesses and individuals, you can really harm growth. My guess is we're going to have divided government of some form. Okay. It's pretty clear to me that we're going to win the U.S. Senate because of the way the Senate map is laid out. So let's just assume, for the sake of argument, we have divided government. I think that's the likeliest assumption. And then you're going to have a negotiation on tax policy in the next session of Congress. And what that looks like is basically what we try to help scenario plan. But that's definitely going to happen. One thing people don't in the continent understand as much is most of our businesses are not taxed as corporations. They're taxed as individuals.
Right.
And that provision that lowers their tax rates so that their tax rates are commensurate with corporations, the larger companies, goes away. So you could have a tax rate on small businesses, medium-sized business, as high as 46% in this, 44.6% in America, and that would be a massive tax increase on businesses. I don't think anybody wants to see that happen, but there's not clarity as to whether or not they're going to fix this or not.
Paul, when you go around and speak to chief executives, what is the one thing that they actually underestimate? I don't know whether it's geopolitics. We have Putin also meeting with, North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Is that going to change trade relations across the world, and is that what we're underestimating?
I think uncertainty is the number one problem. So there's so much uncertainty. There's geopolitics, there's NATO, there's Ukraine, there's Putin, there's conflict with China. you have a war in the Middle East, and then also, by the way, you have a bunch of tariffs that are being proposed. So you just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what antitrust laws are going to look like. If Biden gets a second term, is he going to double down on a lot of regulations? So you just don't know, not to mention all the geopolitical risks that are outside of any government's control. So that's what CEOs are trying to prepare for.
And what do you tell them? Just be nimble and prepare for.
Yeah, here's what door one looks like. Here's what door two looks like. You want a contingency plan for both scenarios.
Yeah, but how impossible is it to say actually what door one looks like, given the unpredictability of Donald Trump in the past?
Without getting into all the details, I think on tax and regulatory policy, it's pretty predictable. On tariffs, just listen to what he's proposing. I think it's just that clear. And then you have to plan accordingly. On regulations with Biden, I don't think you should expect him to do anything different than what he's doing now, which is a lot of regulations. I think if Trump gets in, you'll have less regulations. So you have to go through all those kinds of scenarios.
What's your Republican Party going to look like? I mean, you were once one of the great hopefuls. Do you see still a place for you in it?
Well, I am still a Republican, of course. I consider myself an anti-establishment Republican. Trump has taken over the Republican Party. It's really a populism without any anchor to principles. I'm a big believer that you want your party pledging fidelity to a set of principles and policies that solve problems versus a person. And I don't think a personality-type politics is durable. So I do think at the end of the day, our party, like we have in the past, will have a big discussion about what we stand for. What are our ideas? What are our principles? And who are the best people capable of carrying those ideas forward? That's not the conversation we're having right now.
Right.
But he's going to, if Trump wins, he's a one-term president. He cannot have a second term because he already had one. So I just don't think it's durable, and I think we're going to have a real calling as to what we stand for.
And if he doesn't win, is that when you have that conversation?
Yeah, that happens sooner rather than later.
And who do you think? I mean, where do you see?
Well, that's a good question. We have a great bench of talent. We have a lot of really good, effective governors. We've got a bunch of new people that have come to Congress. So I'm not worried about our depth of our talent pool. It's just the shadow that Trump casts over our party is dominant. And when that shadow goes, whether it's in 1 or 4 years, then you're going to have a more lively discussion about what is the conservative movement in America, what does the Republican Party stand for.
So crypto, you're also a believer, kind of a proponent of crypto. Where do you see it?
Well, I think blockchain has a lot of use cases.
Right. For central banks?
Yeah, so, what I proposed the other day is that we should advance stablecoin legislation because stablecoins actually creates a lot of new demand for U.S. debt. So we talked just a minute earlier about potential treasury auction failures. Well, it would be nice if we created more demand for our debt, and if we had a law, which there's bipartisan support for in Congress, to advance stablecoins. I think that helps put the dollar in the digital world. Right. It helps give people who have bad currencies in some countries digital dollars, and it creates new demand for our debt. So I think there are a lot of good, interesting, exciting use cases for blockchain, for Web3. Stablecoins is one of them, and I think it actually helps solve some of our fiscal problems as well.
Does that happen under Trump or Biden?
Yeah, I think it happens under either because it has bipartisan support. It's really a matter of if, not when.